Though we're celebrating 100 weeks in a row of Luckyzilla comic strips, which is a lot, it's certainly an accomplishment, but Lucky's history in comics actually goes back much further. I mean, I created Luckyzilla at age 10 at a lunch table during recess, and it wasn't long after his creation that I began to contemplate putting him in a comic, because I didn't know anything about making movies. I didn't know I was going to have any interest in animation. I was a huge fan of the recently canceled Sonic the Hedgehog comic book series by Archie, the early stories of which were written and drawn respectively by Michael Gallagher and Dave Manek, whose work still influences me to this day, 24 years later. We're about to spend some time looking through Lucky's comic book history, unfortunately some of which is history. This is the earliest surviving drawing of Lucky. It was drawn the exact same day as the first Luckyzilla comic strip. A teacher, Mr. Alderson, hands out the Iowa tests to my class. Among the pupils is, of course, me, but with hideous-looking sideburns. I call out to Luckyzilla telepathically for him to save me from the educational weapons of mass destruction. And he comes along, he lifts the roof of the school, gathers all the tests, and simply devours them. After two previous attempts, at least two, to create a Luckyzilla comic books from start to finish. I'm talking a full story, not a strip with, 8 or 9 panels. This comic book right here rolled off of my computer's printer in 1999. It pits Lucky against the dastardly Ultra Heeklebot, an invention of the equally dastardly scientist, Dr. Aaron Heekle. It didn't really catch on, number one, and number two, it just didn't feel right. So this version of Lucky, though, it is the first one to be published. I self-published it. Fortunately, it was not to last, because what I came up with later on was far superior. After a few years in the doghouse, Luckyzilla reemerged, fully redesigned, and with a new setting, with a new premise, with new characters. I spent an entire year revamping Luckyzilla. He has a human alter ego in Bruce Deodato. Ralph the Rat is there, counseling him. Not yet the benefactor of his powers. That was kind of hereditary, something with a birthmark. But Harmony D'Angelo, who's there too, is totally different. I have here the first drawing of Harmony D'Angelo. It's hideous. Hideous, to say the least. And totally not the character that she would become. Here, she's just his secretary. As with the animated short When the Doberman Calls, she's also his secretary. And in Atomics, she's also his secretary.
Well, who called?
Some guy from the DA's office called, said some thug named the Frog was arrested for possession of Atomics.
So I did 2 comics that were 64 pages each. They're all penciled, they've never been inked. There was a fragment of a story that I started that would have been in this same series that was colored, which gives you an idea of what I was kind of going for, but keyword here is not finished. What was going to be the 3rd issue of this series introduces the Ref. This may come as a surprise to some of you who have only become aware of Luckyzilla from reading the strips, but the Ref was in there very early on. The problem with this version of Luckyzilla was the fact that, I got a little ahead of myself. I didn't know where to go from there. I had these 2 big stories, 128 pages of comics, but what to do with them? I considered both of them a loss, and I swore off comics for 15 years. 2015 was a remarkable year for me. I moved into my first apartment, and I began production on Out of Bounds, which is the as-of-yet-to-be-completed animated Luckyzilla pilot. It wasn't long before I began to realize that I was putting all of my time and energy into something that, like the two big Luckyzilla comics of 2000, should this fail, all my hard work on it would be for nothing. I found a way to do comic strips, and I said to myself, try to do a weekly strip. But then again, how am I going to tell a story? The key word here is don't. Situations. Make up situations. Put characters in situations and, have them react to them. The comics were totally uninterrupted from October 18th of 15 on. First they were published Sunday, then they were published Monday. Didn't miss a week. As the new year came into being, and I was able to keep meeting my deadlines and exceeding them, as I often do, not trying to brag because it's no small task, I decided I was getting ready to kick things up a notch. It was during the release of Lucky's first story strip, relatively speaking, that I started the process of creating his second story strip, and when, relatively speaking, through all 5 parts managed to reach over 5,000 people, I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, it's 5 weeks of material. I'm going to be publishing another 8 weeks of material with this story that I'm working on right now, and which I completed in just over a month, from script to roughs to inking and coloring to the final lettering to the final layout. The whole thing was done and scheduled. I ended up pulling it because that story, Beauty and the Bistro, became Luckyzilla number 1. The Luckyzilla number 1 to end all Luckyzilla number 1s. I can't tell you how nervous I was about creating yet another Luckyzilla number 1. I almost didn't want to put number 1 on the front of the book. But I ended up doing it anyway because why not? So Luckyzilla number 1 debuts at EternalCon in June of 2016, and it takes a while to really catch on. It wasn't until my first 2 conventions of 2017 did I get to a point where I had now sold 50 books of number 1 and sell out of numbers 2 and 3, but I'm getting ahead of myself. It's been nearly 2 years since I started publishing, and within that time, I've created over 200 pages worth of comics, mostly on my own. Some with the help of my closest friends, Jason Klein and Ed Giassen. In addition to 100 weekly strips, I've published 5 issues of the Luckyzilla comic book, the 6th of which is due out October 16th of this year. At the very least, for the coming year of 2018, you can very safely expect another 52 weeks of Luckyzilla comics and 4 new stories in Luckyzilla numbers 7, 8, 9, and 10. And hopefully, keyword hopefully, the new animated pilot. In closing, I just want to say, and you probably heard this many, many times before, believe in what you're doing. Otherwise, find something that you can believe in. Now start drawing.